Hey everybody, it is Rebel Rock Radio, and this is a special YouTube exclusive video, and I am joined today by my friend Spencer. How's it going, Spencer?
It's going good.
And we are going to chat a bit about a movie that we both recently just saw, was just released, and that is Dune Part 2. As of this recording, I've seen it twice. What about you, Spencer? Just once?
Once. I'm planning on seeing it again next week. Yeah. There was talks about maybe I'd see it today again, but it's one of those things where it's just like, things come up that takes priority, so I have to make sure.
Sure.
Life stuff comes up first. So,
well, I saw it today. So today is Monday. I saw it Thursday with my youngest child, and then I saw it again yesterday.
Nice.
And I went and saw it again because I wanted to see it in IMAX.
That's the way to go.
Just because visually and I guess what would be the auditorially, like the visuals and the audio were just so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I saw it, I'm like, oh man, this has got to be like 10 times better in IMAX.
Yeah, I saw it for the fan first screenings that they did like almost a whole week before showings first started this Sunday.
I almost went to it, but like the day that it came out, I think it was like last Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
I just forgot to go. But
for me, it was like completely sold out, and that was great. But the other thing of it too, you're talking about IMAX, and it's like if there's a movie to go big for, to go watch it on a bigger screen, like especially an IMAX screen, it's like this is the movie I feel like to do it for. There's so many movies that I'm just generally excited for, so I'll go watch it on the IMAX screen, but it's not really like takes the full advantage of it. But like Dune takes the full advantage of it like the entire time, which is amazing.
Yeah, there are a lot of movies out there that like you go to and it's like, yeah, I don't think IMAX would really do much for it. But
right.
But so when I was living in Michigan, now I'm trying to remember when it was. I mean, I know when I was living in Michigan, but I went to the IMAX screen. It was a re-release of Rogue One Radio.
Oh, that's awesome.
And Rogue One Radio. Rogue One, the movie.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah. So it was a re-release of that in IMAX.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I actually saw it all 3 days it was playing. It was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And they were doing the re-release to kind of lead up to Andor, because it was right before Andor hit the TV, hit Disney Plus. And I remember that experience being really, really great. I mean, not just because I liked the movie Rogue One that much, but because it was just like, wow, this is IMAX is actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because up to that, I think I'd only been to one IMAX. And I think I may have had this conversation with somebody in the Discord server about how, like, I didn't like IMAX because it made me nauseous. But when I went and saw Rogue One, I was like, okay, I'm thinking of something else, because I can't see how this would make me nauseous.
Talk about the D-box seats? Like,
I don't know. It was a long time ago. Anyway, so it was a really incredible experience. So when I went and saw Dune, uh, Dune Part Two, rather. The first time, I was like, man, I got to see this in IMAX.
Yeah.
And having not seen any IMAX movies since Michigan, it was a different experience. I'm not sure if the theater that I went to, if the screen was 100% according to definition an IMAX screen, because it did not seem like the same screen that I saw Rogue One on. So visually, I was like, okay, it's about the same. It wasn't really much different. Uh, but the audio, I could definitely tell, because there were times during the movie where my seat was rumbling,
Yes.
and I was like, man, this is so fucking great.
You're right.
So okay,
Yeah.
so overall, what were your impressions of Dune Part Two?
Overall, I thought it was just it's great, right? Like I genuinely don't see out of all the other big like American blockbusters that's coming out, I don't see anything necessarily beating it. Um at least as far as like what's most anticipated for the year, right? Who
Yeah,
knows? There could always be like an indie movie or some foreign movie that just comes out of the blue, like look at Godzilla minus one, that could like just steal the show. But like as of this moment, I'm like, holy crap, this is like I feel like it's movie of the year right now.
yeah, I can see that. This is really good. Now, the other movie that I'm really looking forward to, I think of all the movies that I'm looking forward to throughout the year, I have to say it's a tie between Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes and the new Deadpool.
Yeah, like Deadpool, I think will be fun, but like I just don't think it'll reach like the storytelling that this movie does.
Yeah, I was going to
Um,
say those are the two that I'm looking forward to the
yeah,
most. But
for sure.
I, I really think it would surprise me if they end up being better than Dune.
Yeah.
I just don't see it. Now, um I will say that man, I'm looking at all the movies that I've watched in 2024 so far, and
A lot of not great movies so far,
a lot
seemingly.
of, yeah, a lot of not great movies. I mean, there have been some movies that I've seen in the theater this year that were just absolute crap.
Cough,
There
Madam Web,
was,
cough.
I
Anyway,
mean, there were
sorry.
some that was like, yeah, it was good. It was good. I saw Godzilla minus one again, but this time it was the black and white version, and that was really good. But
Yeah,
I don't really count that one because it's not really a new release per se.
sure.
But so there've been a couple that were like, yeah, those were good, but there were also, like you said, there were some movies that were just absolute crap, and I
Yeah.
would not recommend to anybody. Um, so if you look at my letterboxed, is that how it's pronounced? Um, and I'll put a link to that in the description for this episode. But if we don't count Godzilla minus one, it is the only movie on my letterboxed that I've given any stars to. So,
Take that as you
um,
will, folks.
but yeah, continue. What were your overall impressions of the movie?
Yeah, I mean, just overall, it's a basic movie. I think it captures the book really well. Overall, I mean, I think something both that part one and this part did great as well is just like it's a great translation on screen, right?
Yeah,
Director Denis Villeneuve, or however you say his name, he does a great job of focusing on that cinema at the end of the day is meant to be about visuals. Um, and he really conveys that in both the movies. And this one, I feel like really in a big way sort of just like steps up the ante almost,
yeah,
because it's all about the first movie set up the dominoes. Here, it's more about watching all that fall. And
yeah,
so it's just a little bit more. I mean, I love the first one, but this one was just a little more.
Yeah.
What was the word I'm looking for? Just it just had what you wanted there, um, and it was great.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I agree. It was, man, I don't know if I liked this one better than the first one. Um, now I will say that this, like I said on the letterbox, it was the first one that I gave stars to. Incredible movie. Probably just like you, it's probably going to be movie of the year for me. Unless something jumps out, just like you said, if something jumps out and just totally surprises me. Um, it was just, I mean, the story was really great. And we talked about this before. You've actually read the book,
Yes.
whereas I have not. And now I did start it, and I did start it today. Um, like after I saw it the first time on Thursday, I was like, man, I really need to read the book. And I went to my Libby app, which is where I typically read or listen to audiobooks,
Mhm.
and it wasn't available. It was like put a hold on the audiobook. See,
I'd
we won't
imagine.
get into that too much. I don't understand how an audiobook could not be available, especially if it's digital. But yeah, so I was like, well, that's a bummer. All right, I'm good. Go ahead and put a hold on it, and eventually I'll be able to read it. Um, and I checked this morning, and it said, "Oh, it's ready. You can borrow it now." I'm like, well, "All right." So I hit borrow and
Nice.
started listening to it, and already, like I mentioned before we started recording, I'm about 15% of the way through, and already I'm like, "This book is freaking amazing. It is so
Yes, it's so
detailed.
good.
It is such a good story. It's so detailed. The characters are really interesting." Um, Now, one thing I have to say about the audiobook is um, whoever is doing the voice for Baron Harkonnen, it is a little bit off-putting because he sounds like James Earl Jones. I'm like, that is not how I imagine Baron Harkonnen talking.
Especially after you have the amazing Stellan Skarsgård doing such
Yeah,
a great job as him and,
yeah, it's
like,
really hard
literally
because
being,
he
like,
does.
scary almost. Like, he brings a great
Oh,
voice to the role.
oh yeah, amazing. Yeah, totally. He does such a. Now I know you haven't seen the 1984 version by David Lynch, who directed it, but so Stellan is by far a better actor and did the role much better. However, visually, and if you ever go watch the David Lynch version, you might agree, visually, that Baron looks better, in my opinion.
Really good
Um,
picture.
and it's just based on some things that I've read about the character, um, about how he's all like messed up and has scars and stuff all over him.
Mm,
Um,
interesting.
but in any case, so far the audiobook is really amazing, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest of it. Um, but um, yeah, I don't know if part two is for me is better than the first. In fact, I was listening to a podcast earlier today. It was Nick Flex. Have you ever listened to that one?
I do not believe so.
Okay.
I may have
Well,
once, but I don't
I'm
think
gonna
so.
put a link to that in the show description as well. Nick Flex is a podcast, obviously, where the host is Nick, and he usually has a guest on, and he basically just talks about different movies. It's like basically just a movie podcast, and it's a really good podcast. But he did he did an episode yesterday, with Chantel about Dune. And what was I getting at? Now I forgot why I was bringing it up in the first place. Gosh dang it. Awesome. Okay. Well, that was it. He did a podcast about Dune. It was cool. Go check it out. Why was I bringing it up? Don't ever get old, man. Crap.
Well, I don't know what you were trying to get to there, but while you're talking about reading or starting listening to Dune, and it sort of just made me think of that the way I've related these two Dune movies now. Well, I've been saying this about the first Dune movie, and I think this new one is just even it carries it on.
I remember why I was bringing it up. He was making a point that he didn't really see. It was either him or Chantel. I'm pretty sure it was him, and she might have agreed with him. Just they didn't really see it as a sequel, but more of a continuation.
Yeah, I was just gonna like almost get to that actually, was that the way I've sort of viewed these two Dune movies, especially with how much this is more of a continuation, right? Because
Yeah.
I was honestly expecting a little bit of a time gap with it being a part 2.
None. Almost
And
none.
it was barely any time gap, and I was kind of for a moment, I'm not gonna say that like took me back, but like I was like, okay, that's not quite where I thought it would have started at, which I
Yeah.
really enjoyed, and so it really makes a. I think before I watch it next time, I'm probably gonna rewatch the first one just before seeing it.
Yeah. I'm probably
And
going to
so,
watch the first one again too.
but like how I've sort of like just viewed these Dune movies though is that it's like I feel like it's the sci-fi version of what Lord of the Rings was, and y- they translate so much well from the book, but then also changes things that makes it make sense. Like changes that make sense with it on. And Dune 2 does a big one at the end.
Yeah.
But I think I don't know if you know about what it is, but I was thinking about it. I was like, I think they did that to make it hit better with the modern audience. And so,
Yeah.
um, it's one of those things where I feel like the changes make sense. Like any of the changes I see across both part 1 and part 2, I'm like, okay, I think there's good justification behind why
Mhm.
they translated it this way. Much like what Lord of the Rings did
Yeah.
overall.
So let's talk about some of the actors in this movie.
Oh my gosh, such a stacked cast.
It really was. So of course, Timothy Chalamet as Paul Atreides.
He did a fantastic job. I really was I knew he was a good actor, right? Like
Yeah.
he's a good actor, but like he did a really good turn for Paul Atreides is what I'm gonna say. Um, yeah, he does a really good job of showing his journey because by the end of Dune, just in general, as far as the first novel goes, he's a completely different character than when you first meet him,
Yeah.
and um,
There definitely is an evolution to
yeah.
his.
And while you don't really see that evolution quite click off at the beginning of part 2, you can
Oh
see
yeah.
that it's like the beginning of the turning point because and you see like his main like what his character was like all part 1. And so
Yeah.
anyway, he portrayed a great job of the evolution of the character throughout this movie. And I think it really shows and it really helps show off with some of the other characters as well.
So I want to keep this discussion as spoiler free as possible, but I do want to say, and if you haven't seen the movie or read the book, you might want to pause while I mention that by the end of Dune Part Two, you really start to almost dislike Paul Atreides. You're like, what an
Yeah.
ass.
So yeah, it I don't want to say too much on
but
that front
for reasons.
because
I mean, it's
yeah,
not
yeah,
like you just don't
there's
like him.
reason.
It's just like,
It's
man,
yeah,
it's the
it's
way I'm assuming he's written.
it's really interesting too because that I wouldn't say is necessarily the feeling you get right offhand at the beginning from the first Dune book. And I feel like
Okay.
I think in the long run it's to help if they do Messiah, which I think
Yeah.
would be a great trilogy if they were
Yeah.
are able to do Messiah.
So you got Zendaya as
Channy,
Johnny,
she did a great job.
and she's fine. She does her job. She's
I
fine.
think she did good.
Yeah. Um. So Lady Jessica who is Paul's mom, is played by Rebecca Ferguson,
Yep.
and I thought she was a lot better in this one than part one.
I could see that. I mean, I think part of it too is like her character was a lot more compelling in part two.
That yeah, could be it. She was definitely a lot more compelling. Um, Josh Brolin as Gurney was awesome.
Yes.
Um,
He had his little moment to shine at one moment, and that was amazing.
yeah, yeah. Um, so all of those we saw in part one, but there were a few that we had not seen before. The first one I'm going to mention is Austin Butler, who
Oh
played
yes.
Fade, who is Baron Harkonnen's youngest nephew, and man, he was amazing.
He
He was
did
like
great.
creepy
Arguably,
as hell.
yes, he did a fantastic job. And
Like the only other movie I think I've seen him in that I can think of off the top of my head is the Elvis movie, and it was like, dude, that was the same guy that played Elvis. Holy hell! But yeah, he was creepy as all hell, and yeah, just I like. Some people may not have liked it, but I liked how he was trying to, if he was actually trying to do this, um, sound kind of like the Baron, but add his own little twist to it. Like
I could see
it made
that.
it
Yeah,
more believable that they were related.
for sure.
Yeah, but he was amazing.
I
Uh,
just all the visuals with him was great as well.
mhm.
The whole we see this a little bit in the trailers, and I think anyone would make the fair guess, and they'd be correct of the way you're sort of introduced to him is during like this whole black and white moment,
Yeah,
which the trailers highlight, and like that moment, that moment was a little longer than I expected, but it was so good though that entire time, just being like, holy crap, he's like, it really sets him up big.
yeah, yeah. Um, and again, you haven't seen the David Lynch, but he does a much better job as Fade than Sting, and a lot of it has to do, I think, with the actual performance, uh, but also in the David Lynch, they really didn't set up his character all that much. They just kind of threw him in, and they expected you to believe that he's this badass. And it's like, okay, why do I care about this character? Is the impression that I got. But in this movie, it's like, oh, okay, yeah.
Gotcha.
Um, and this is the first movie where we get to see not only the emperor but the emperor's daughter. So the emperor uh, is played by Christopher Walken, which was an interesting choice. Uh, like, okay, I have to admit I'm glad he didn't have a lot of dialogue.
I don't I don't know. I think he did a good job with.
I
I don't
think
know.
just his presence, like just his presence, was great as the
Sure.
emperor. When he started talking, I was like, I don't know. but 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 Florence Pugh as the princess, man, she was amazing.
Yeah, she's
I
a great actor.
I loved the parts where she's like writing in her diary,
Yeah.
uh, and she, she's given information. Um, but yeah, that was really good. The other person that we do not see in the first one, who I mean, we barely see her in this one because it's essentially just a cameo appearance, and that is Anya Taylor Joy as Aaliyah, um, which is a huge departure from the David Lynch film because she is. I don't want to use the word prominently, but she does not only show up in that movie, like she's born, and she's grown to maybe like 5 or 6,
What?
but she has
What?
several speaking roles,
That's so weird. I could tell I
and
probably wouldn't like that then.
it's like, well, the speaking role she has is like toward the end because she's like
Sure.
directly talking to uh the emperor and the Bene Gesserit,
That's weird.
and she's like basically just telling them off. Um, which again, not having read the book, I don't know which one's correct.
One's definitely
Uh,
a lot more closer than the other. I'll keep
what's
it at
that
that.
one?
I said one's a lot more closer. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd say this new one's a lot more faithful from what I hear about the old one.
yeah. So in this movie, I mean, the only time we see her is in a vision, and we see
Yeah,
her for like 5 seconds. So it's like,
yeah.
um, so I have no, I really have no commentary on her.
It's such an interesting thing of like why they casted such a big name actress in that role. I feel like because like I'll be honest, if
Well,
Anya
when they
Taylor Joy was
filmed
to
it,
come,
was she a big name?
well, yeah, I think so.
Was she?
I'd
See,
argue a fair
I
bit.
was gonna say I haven't really seen her in all that much. So um,
Let me see.
I think the only movie. Oh, you know what? Actually, there are 2 movies that I've seen her. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, there's definitely
I'm
some
looking at her
notable
list. I've
movies
seen
on this
3.
list. I'm saying.
She was in the New Mutants. She played Magic. She was in The Northman, which I don't know if you've seen it, but
Yeah,
it's
that's a really good.
okay. Yeah, she was good in that one, and she was in The Menu,
Yep.
and those are the only things I've seen her in. Oh, wait a minute.
She was in Split, which I've
Yeah,
seen
I'm looking at that. Yeah,
part
she
of.
was in Split.
Glass.
Okay, she was in Glass. Okay, maybe she's been in more than I thought. Okay then.
and and around the same time, probably even before, she was cast in the Mario Bros. Movie, which was a huge part thing as well. And so, because she
Well,
voiced
she only
Peach,
did a voice in that one though,
sure,
so
but still a big role that I think she probably would have done before.
I think I
Probably
think her biggest role is coming up later this year. She's going to play Furiosa.
right. Yeah, I forgot
Yeah,
about that.
but
Um,
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
just based on what we saw in this movie, I can't really make any big commentary, positive or negative, because
So
it's like she was just there.
here's what I say about that is obvious. It wouldn't for her to come back. She wouldn't really play a big role until they try to adapt the third book, which, as far as we know, isn't really planned. That's why I
Mm,
find it so interesting because they get a bigger name actress, like not a huge name actress, obviously, but like they get someone that has a good bit of legibility to their name here, and for just 5 seconds that they may not ever touch again.
yeah. I mean, um, just based on how well the it's doing already, it would not surprise me if he decides to do a third one.
Well, I know Dennis really wants to. It's more the matter of, if the studios are happy with how much money it's made.
Sure,
And I
sure.
think the big thing about this movie is that it's has the potential to have legs to make um a good bit of money. Um I think overall it made about the same amount of money that Oppenheimer did. And so people are kind of like tracking it around the same thing. And like if it gets close to that 800, 900 million, I think I'd imagine they'd be happy with that, seeing that it's a pretty good franchise that's growing, saying people still want to see more of it after the first one, which that first one did a okay amount of money in the box office, considering it was also an HBO Max release at the time. And so it's I don't know, there's just a big numbers game to where it has potential. The biggest problem is March is a huge month for movies. Uh, at the time we're recording this Friday, there's Kung Fu Panda 4, and then a couple weeks later is Ghostbusters. Week after that's Godzilla vs Kong, or sequel to it, Godzilla X Kong, and so
Yeah,
it'll be very like it's a lot of big notable movies that's also stands in this way, but it has the potential to like, especially with all the great like words saying around it, I think is a huge plus for it. The good word of mouth, right? Of
yeah,
like everyone saying, "Hey, this is a great movie." So really does it has big potential to keep on pulling in strong numbers to have a good run.
yeah. I think it'll do. I think it. I mean, so far it's already doing pretty well at the box office. Um,
Yeah, I hope it keeps it up.
yeah. So if it keeps on this trajectory, um, so I'm looking at the Wikipedia page of this movie, and it says a sequel based on Dune Messiah is in development.
Yeah, Dennis said that he's
Hmm,
almost done writing it.
interesting. Yeah.
So, yeah. It'll be very interesting to see how they adapt that, because I definitely feel like there's a big aspect of the movie that helps set it up. Um, from my understanding, The Messiah, when it came out, was a very decisive novel. Kind of like, I guess the easiest way to say would be like almost like the Last Jedi of Dune, right? Obviously, of that idea of being like it's decisive. Some people really liked it, some people hated it. And so if you get around to reading it or listening to it, you'd understand why.
Yeah. Um, so this is going to kind of get your thoughts on both of the movies, part one and
Sure.
part two. Um, how does it compare to the novel?
I As I mentioned earlier, I think it's just very close to like what Lord of the Rings did. It's a great adaptation on screen. There's definitely parts that shifts around. Like even you reading it just now, you probably noticed where a couple big moments where it shifted around, right? Like the
Hmm.
opening chapter or
Oh yeah,
two, shifting around. But as I also mentioned earlier, I think there's a case for where a lot of those things that make sense of why they're shifted around, right? And not just one of
yeah,
those things of like, yeah, we're just being different because we can. And
right,
so
right.
I think it did. I think overall they do a great job of adapting it and making it to where it's easier digestible for. I think some of it maybe just be the more modern culture of where movies are at, and just other parts of it just simply being it's a different format, versus a book versus film. And so I definitely think it's like very faithful overall. And I know there's a couple changes here and there that with this one I know people are like not super happy about that I've heard, but like I
Hmm.
think it's one that it's I think it's still faithful overall of just being able to really capture the spirit, and like I said, it's changes that I think were needed probably.
Yeah. So as of this recording, it is the fifth highest grossing film of 2024, and it is the first one in the list that is not a Chinese film. So the number 1 through the number 4 are all Chinese films.
Interesting.
Yeah. Looking at the highest grossing film, I mean, it's only March, but looking at the highest grossing films of 2024, the number 10 spot is very disturbing. It is one of those movies. I'm not going to mention the title, but it's one of those movies that we were kind of loosely referring to earlier when we were talking about movies we've seen in 2024. And this one was a big pile of crap. But it's the 10th highest grossing movie of 2024. So, wow. Okay.
That's
Yeah,
hilarious.
I mean, once this one's been out a few more weeks, it would not surprise me if this one starts topping the charts.
Yeah, it's. I think it'll hold a strong spot overall for I think a good bit.
Yeah.
I know. I'm sure number wise it'll be dethroned. Like I think Deadpool 3 is going to beat it, guys. Like that. That's just a big. I think number wise, Deadpool 3
Oh, yeah,
has the potential to do the biggest this year. Honestly,
probably money wise, yeah,
unless it gets like absolutely like terrible like reactions, but like it has huge potential. Other than that, I don't. I'm just trying to think of what could be huge. 'Cause I feel like the
Mm,
back half of this year is really dry compared to the first half, and I was just trying to think of
yeah,
what's big.
I would agree. Let me look of the list that I had. Well, Ghostbusters might do pretty well.
It could definitely could.
Um, Possibly the Beetlejuice movie.
That actually has pretty good potential, and plus they're releasing it at a smart time too.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, looking at all of the movies that are coming out this year that I've made a list of movies that I want to see. I really don't, like we'd mentioned earlier in the show. Um, it's going to really surprise me if any of these turn out better than Dune Part Two, and it also would not surprise me a bit if this movie ends up winning several Oscars.
Oh, I think hands down it'll probably it has a huge potential win for visuals like part 1 did, and
Yeah,
I'd say this movie, like, upped some of the visuals a lot of the visuals, I'd say.
sound
Uh,
editing probably.
that's a big possibility as well. I'm trying to
Yeah.
remember which ones oh, Hans Zimmer did an absolutely amazing job with the score as well.
Oh, absolutely.
It's so
Like
good.
I was just talking about this earlier today with some folks. Like when I left the theater for the first one, the main takeaway at first that I had of the movie is how good the score was. And I
Yes.
was just like,
It's so
man,
good.
the music to that was just freaking on point. So
Yes.
that was like going into this movie, I was like, man, I wonder if this one will be as good. And yeah, it did not disappoint.
Yeah.
Um, which really we can say about the movie as a whole, man. It will not disappoint.
Absolutely.
If you've not seen this movie, go see it. If you haven't seen
It's
the first one, you should probably go see the first one. And
yeah,
or it's on HBO Max. I don't know if it's on any other streaming services,
it
but
was on Netflix. I don't know if it still is, but Yeah, if there's a
Good
movie
question.
to make it out to, it's Dune 2, I feel
Let
like.
me let me pull
It's
up my
the
Netflix account here real quick and see it. I'll be able to answer that question. So as of this recording, oh man, I gotta log in. What the hell? Why am I not? Okay. Uh, okay. So log into my account here and movies. I'm not seeing it here, but let me just do a search for it.
it's possible.
It does not appear to be on Netflix right now.
So not anymore. It was.
So HBO
Probably
Max, I
was.
know I checked yesterday. Um, so yeah, if you have not
Yep.
seen
Oh, I see it there.
part one, uh, I would strongly recommend you go see it. You don't want to watch this without watching the first one. Uh, but it will definitely go see it in the theater because it will not disappoint you.
For
Uh,
sure.
Visually amazing, audio is amazing, score is amazing, acting is amazing. Uh, Story is just a continuation of the first one, and it's very. There are some very climactic moments. So
So much that happens.
yeah,
It's a great roller coaster, I'd say, because
it
it
is.
does balance a lot of emotions, I feel like, very well. And I
Yeah,
think Dennis said it really well of being I'm trying to remember his exact wording, but him essentially talking about it being a love story set in the middle of a huge war,
yeah, yeah.
and
I
it
could
does
totally
a
see
great
that.
job of showing this uh,
Yeah, could
the whole
totally see
time.
that. Cool. All right, cool. Well, Spencer, thanks for talking about some Dune Part Two with me, and
S-
we'll probably have some further conversations about the book as I read more of it.
Absolutely.
Um, but yeah, thanks to everybody for tuning in. Make sure that you tune in to the Dingus Den. Um, I will have a link to that channel in the show description. And do you have anything new and exciting coming up soon?
No, not really. To be completely honest, I've been super busy with personal life to where YouTube has had much time in the light right now, so not
Well,
much anything at
you're
all.
also doing that versus the Marvel universe
Yes,
or
yeah,
MCU. Yeah.
I've been doing that with Blue. We just did Iron Man 2 that just released today as of this recording,
Okay.
and
Yeah. Let
and then
me.
I'm also involved with Red Shirts Remastered, where I'm one of 4 people there, and we just had a huge successful. Well, I'm not gonna say huge, but we had a pretty successful charity 2-day streamathon that we just did last week that
Very cool.
uh, passed our expectations, which was amazing. And so, very nice surprise that we got then.
Cool. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on, and thanks for tuning in to this video. Make sure you tune in to our regularly scheduled episodes of Rebel Rock Radio on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central. And we'll see you again next time.